Israelites. And as a prophet of what's going to happen. And the angel Gabriel tells him, all these troubled times, the people that do know their God shall be strong and do great things. So even though I struggle when I read the Bible, I'll be the first to admit, yeah, how great our God is, how little I know of him, how little I understand of him. This encourages me all the time that I have to know my God. I have to be secure and strong in knowledge of how great my God is so that I can be strong in my faith and do great things. And I pray the same thing for all of you. This is why I share such a difficult topic, because I want all of us to be secure and strong in our God. So this is the sort of like struggle or paradox that all of us have. The Christian journey is a constant struggle. It is a struggle. Let's be honest about it. Okay? Nobody ever gets baptized and comes out and say, oh, instantly I know all about God. Everything has been downloaded. I'm a perfect expert on God. Right? So it's a struggle to know our awesome and infinite God, because we are finite. We are small. Our minds have limited capacity. Our faith is limited. Right? But so we struggle, but we have to make this struggle, this effort to constantly try to know as much as we can about our God, and to just, if nothing else, comprehend that He's so much greater than anything on earth, anything that has been created. All right, so there are two equal and opposite dangers, I think, of the Christian walk. One is, I just give up. God is so great. It's like that lah, God is just like that. Right? No point trying to understand him, no point trying to know him, because he's just too great. Yeah, that's one danger. The other danger, of course, is to be gay kiang and say, I'm a mature Christian, I know everything already. Just ask me, I know. Yeah, whatever you want to know, just ask me, I know. Right? So the first position weakens our faith because we don't know and trust in our God. And I suspect if you're like me, that's the position that you tend towards lah. You tend to say, oh, I'm such a sinner, I'm so weak. How can I talk about my God? How can I share about my God? I don't know anything about him. He's just too great. Right? However, there are some people, some Christians who are the opposite, the green position, yeah, and a little bit too cocky, and that leads to arrogance, that leads to presumption, that you know the mind of God. When the Bible very clearly says, who can know the mind of God to instruct him? Right? So today we're going to navigate that struggle. We're going to encourage each other in that struggle. To know how great our God is, to understand what is told about us through the Bible, about God through the Bible, through creation, through our own experience, and experience of those, especially the mature Christians, the ones who walk with faithfully before God for many, many years. You've seen them, you've seen their fruits. Jesus always says, by their fruits, you will know them. Right? And then they will share, as they've been sharing, we learn some things about our God that strengthens us, that reinforces our faith. And that's where we want to be. Right? So one major challenge to all this, let's just get this out of the way. Okay, I don't think this is an important point, but you probably have heard this many, many times. There's no scientific proof for God. Yeah, all the atheists, all the atheist scientists, right? All these people say this, right? It depends on what you mean by proof, right? The trouble is that science relies on scientific proof. Now, if you think about it, of course, it's circular, right? I can tell you that Robbie is the greatest person in the whole world. Yeah, thank you, right? And the proof of this is the Robbie evidence on the Robbie method. What is the Robbie method? It's what Robbie tells you lah. Okay, so Robbie tells you Robbie is the greatest in the whole world, therefore it must be true. That's a little bit like what science is. Science only acknowledges what it calls scientific proof, that which can be recreated in the lab, that which can be observed by the eye, that can be measured quantitatively, right? And in all these things, of course, there is very, very limited ways to measure God, because God doesn't allow himself to be measured scientifically, right? That doesn't mean he doesn't exist. That doesn't mean his creation is not that, and his power in creation is not any less real. There's lots of proof of God's existence. It's just not necessarily scientific proof. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying throw out science. We do need our science for our aircon, our electricity, our lights to start your car, all these sorts of things, right? We also need doctors. Don't forget, God made doctors, God invented doctors. A lot of medicines actually came from natural, I don't know whether you know this, but a lot of medicines actually came from nature, right? Aspirin, quinine, the cure for malaria, all came from natural herbs, right? So not to throw out science, but just to realize that science is limited. It's very, very limited. And there are lots of things that are very, very important that can't really be measured by the scientific method. I'll just name one right now. Love. Love is not a scientific phenomenon. You can't measure love in a scientific way. You can't account for it in a scientific way. Yeah. And God, who is love and who is far greater than anything in this world, any scientist, any scientific method, also is not necessarily going to allow himself to be measured by science. So we just get that out of the way first. It's not that science doesn't have its own use and its own validity. Of course it does. It's just that we're talking about a God who is far beyond any human knowledge, any human experience. Yeah. Okay. So what is the evidence? Just think about it. Yeah. Look at each other. Man as fearfully and wonderfully made. The remarkable system, for want of a better word, that is mankind. The healing system, the growing system, the reproductive system that allows us to just thrive as humankind, as human society, as human beings. The wisdom that God has put in many, many men is awesome, really. Yeah, the kind of things that some people know and can do, the talents, athletic talents, musical talents, right? You want to choose that to choose to believe that this all descended from monkeys, you can go ahead and do that, of course. Yeah, I refuse to believe it. The beauty of nature. Every time I just look at, what God has created, the wonder of it, the smallest little thing that we don't even understand now. The subcellular life, the subatomic particles, and the powers that control all these subatomic particles that allow them to combine into greater and greater things. It just boggles the mind. Yeah. Then, of course, there's the experience of those who've actually encountered God, and their lives have been transformed. You can't explain that through science. How a Saul who goes around killing all the believers can suddenly encounter this scientific phenomenon? No. He encountered Jesus on the road to Damascus. He saw a light and heard a voice when all those around him could not see anything. He went blind. He heard the Lord's voice. The Lord spoke to him and healed him and sent Ananias to heal him. And when that happened, he was completely transformed. He was so transformed that even his fellow Pharisees could not comprehend how he'd been transformed. It's amazing, right? Was he transformed because of some bizarre, inexplicable experience? No, he encountered God. And that's what he said. He shared openly that he encountered God, and that's why he was transformed. And not only Paul, of course, probably most of us know, even today, people whose life has just been completely changed from night into day, from dark into light. Yeah, if you think a little bit, you'll probably be able to know either that one person like that directly, or somebody's told you or shared about somebody they know who's like that. And these things are living proofs of our reality of God that go far beyond any human measurement, any scientific method. So I just wanted to get that out of the way so that we don't get stripped over this, when we hear people say, oh, there's no scientific proof for God. Yeah, there's no scientific proof for God, but there is lots of proof about God. So I just want to spend a little bit of time today talking about how great our God is. Yeah, we've established that it's a difficult topic to talk about. We've established that it does actually take a little bit of a struggle for us to understand and comprehend our God. We've also established, I think, that it's very, very important that we continue to do that struggle, to undergo that struggle, right? So just a few verses for us to dwell on, a few facts for us to dwell on, so that we just remind each other of this amazing God that we know and that we serve, all right? So a few little facts, yeah? Genesis 1 just throws, Nicky Gumbel talks about this, yeah? There's one verse that is almost like a casual throwaway in Genesis chapter 1, yeah? He made the stars also, right? But let's think about what that really entails. Right? So how many stars are there? I got this from the internet, but fairly reliable sources like NASA and those kinds of things, the web pages. If you search on the internet, you might get different data. That's not because my data is rubbish. It's because no man actually knows. So the figures can actually differ from source to source. But the source that I got, right, is that the estimate is that there are 200 billion trillion stars. That's 200 times 1 billion times a trillion, all right, which is 2 followed by 23 zeros. That's the best that they can guess. All right. So say it with me, 23, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Count. I want you guys to know the magnitude of this figure, okay? 23, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. That's how big that number is. Number of stars. Okay, but what's a star? It's a little twinkle, twinkle. We always sing the song, right? Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Our star, the one that we are orbiting around, we call Sol, right? Each second in the heart of that star, I've been told, right? There's energy that is equivalent to 15 billion times the most powerful thermonuclear bomb that has ever been exploded on Earth. So roughly 15 billion thermonuclear bombs exploding, right? In 1 second at the heart of the sun. Okay? So do simple math, not so simple, because such a huge figure, okay? 1 second, 15 billion thermonuclear bombs times the number of stars, assuming that Sol is the average size, our sun is the average sort of size of all the stars, 200 billion trillion stars, which it may not be. It may be bigger, it may be smaller, but that's just a rough figure, all right? So in every second, the energy that's released in all the stars in the universe, right, is 345, right? Meaning 23 times 15, right? Followed by 32 zeros. One more time, okay? 345 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0. You get tired just saying it. Don't talk about how much energy is actually involved per second in the universe. So I just want to do that silly little exercise to get us a little bit warmed up about and a little bit more engaged to try to wrap our minds around how much power we're talking about here. And Genesis reminds us he made the stars just like that. Right? We don't know how he did it. We don't know how long it took for him to do it, but he did it. Right? Okay, so it's not just the power that's involved in God's creation. It's also reach. What do you mean by reach? You know, often we get asked this question, especially for poor people who undergo suffering or trial or struggling with their faith. Where is God? Where is our God? Yeah. Is he here? Is he there? How do I know that he can be with me? There's so many people on earth. Well, of course, if the fact that he's created 200 billion trillion stars doesn't impress us already, that God actually has a lot of reach. Yeah. We also have to remember that the Bible also tells us that God is everywhere. We'll talk about how he can do this a little bit later on. You see, the biggest problem that we have in our faith very often is that we put God in a human shape. After all, we're told we were made in the image of God. But we're made in the image of God. Now, doesn't mean God is in our image or contained in our image. No. It means that we are some echo, some faint resemblance to God who is spirit and who is power. It doesn't mean God occupies our form. Except for Jesus, who is God made man. For a very, very specific purpose, specific reason, specific season, the 30 years or so that he was on earth. Other than that, just for us to say that man is made in the image of God doesn't mean that God is somehow contained or constrained by our form or our weaknesses. All right? In fact, Solomon, when he dedicated the temple, right, he says, will God indeed dwell in this place? Seeing that even the heaven and the heaven of heavens cannot contain him. So as vast as that universe is with 200 billion trillion stars, we have to open our minds and understand that our God encompasses all of it. I'll talk a little bit more about that a bit again later on, okay? And this is a funny thing. A lot of Christians think that God lives in their church. Yeah? God only lives in my church. I come to Talent Beacon because here I can find God. Right? It's a very, very sad fact, but many Christians make their God so small. In many conscious as well as unconscious ways. And one unconscious way is to think that I come to this church because God is in this church. God is everywhere we can go. The psalmist says, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I hide from you? If I ascend with the wings of the morning, you are there. If I descend down to hell, you are also there. You will never leave me. You will never forsake me, the author of Hebrews says. Wherever you go, God is already there. Right? Now, this is the thing that I don't know why my mind works like that, but when I read the Bible again and again, this is the thing that really baffles me. Do you know that God can move through time? That's my conviction. God can move through time. First of all, we know from the Bible, this is just biblical narrative, facts, right? That God does not experience time the way we experience it. For us, time is like one of the Greek philosophers, I think it was Heraclitus, said that time is like a flowing river for man. Okay, once it flows, right, it's gone. Heraclitus said that you will never step in the same river twice. Even if it's the same river, River Thames, River, Kallang River, whatever it is, you step in it, don't advise it now, okay? But if you want to step in the Kallang River, you step in it today, then tomorrow you say, I want to go back to the Kallang River and step in it again. The Kallang River that you step in tomorrow is no longer the same Kallang River. The water has moved on, the things that are inside the water have moved on. It's a different river. The whole water has changed. For us, for mankind, time is like that. We can't move forward in time except at the pace of the river. We can't jump ahead. Neither can we go back. We can't experience the same river twice as well. God is not like that. God stands outside of time. God does not change or move according to time. And we know this because Malachi chapter 3, verse 6 says, for I'm the Lord, I do not change. Anybody here don't change? You already heard testimony from Pastor Ben, Pastor Darren, that they've changed a lot over the 7 years that they visited. Yeah, you know what kind of change he's talking about, yeah. And we all experience that change. I'm experiencing that change. Grow older, grow weaker, grow more tired, more wrinkles, more white hair, fatter, lose muscle tone, easier to put on fat, harder to lose it. God doesn't change. Right? The kids, of course, want to change because the kids can't wait to grow tall and strong and smarter, right? But God does not change. And again, this is something that we have to remind ourselves constantly about, because as humans, we look around, everybody changes. Everybody experiences time as a stream that they can't re-encounter, they can't control. They just get borne along. We're like little paper boats carried along in a powerful stream. We can't control anything about it. But I'm convinced that God not only does not experience time the way we do, right? In 1 Peter, it says, with the Lord, a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. I've always wondered about that verse. It's a very funny verse if you think about it. That means that if I experience one day, God has experienced 1,000 years. It's a bit strange, right? To think about it. Right? So for 24 hours, as I'm doing my things, I will sleep, I wake up, have breakfast, go to work. Right? God has what? Experienced 1,000 years? But it also says that for God, 1,000 years, 1,000 of our years, I presume, it's like a day for him. If you try to think about it logically, it just doesn't make sense. How can 1,000 years be like a day and a day be like 1,000 years? What I believe Peter and the others who use this image are saying is that you cannot comprehend how God experiences time. He experiences it in a completely different fashion. So over the years, as I read these kinds of verses about God's experience of time over and over and over again, I've come to the conclusion that God is just outside time. It's as simple as that. It's the only way to understand it. Everybody else in creation, stars, planets, mountains, humans, animals, we're all flowing along this river. We all experience it in the same way. One day is one day, 1 week is 1 week, 1 month is 1 month. Yeah, we have different durations in this period. Animals, dogs, for example, live for about 10 years. Humans live for about 80, 90 years. Right? But we're all being moved along at the same time. Everything. Mountains, of course, will take thousands, millions, tens of thousands of years to change, to crumble, to erode. Right? And the only one who's not in this river is God. The only one who can go up here, upstream, go to this park, go ahead. The only one who can move freely around the river is God. He stands outside of time. Right? Which is why he always knows our past and our future. This is important. This is what I wanted to get to. Right? He tells Jeremiah, before I formed you in your mother's womb, I already knew you. Think about what that means. Before God formed Jeremiah in his mother's womb, he already knew Jeremiah, and I knew that I ordained you to be a prophet to the nations. Which means God knew that Jeremiah was going to be, at this point in time, before this is the time that Jeremiah was formed in his mother's womb, right? Before that time, God already knew that this time was going to happen. And before this time happened, and maybe even before this time happened, God already knew what the future for Jeremiah will hold, that he will be ordained as a prophet to the nations. Now, some people may say, well, it's easy for God, right? He just controls the future. Once he controls the future, then of course everybody has to go along with it. It's not as though he can control time. He just says, Zap, Jeremiah, you're going to be a prophet. You got no choice. You want to be a farmer? No, cannot. You're constrained by the power of God. You have to be a prophet. Now, I don't think that's what the Bible is saying. Plus, it goes against a fundamental belief, a fundamental quality of God's character, which is his respect for our free will. God doesn't zap us to do anything that he wants us to do. He always allows a choice. How do we know this? Because he put the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. Right? You got to assume that God is smarter than this. Okay? God knows what's going to happen if he puts the tree there. Please don't believe that God is stupid. All right? He knows what's going to happen when he puts the tree there. Why does he put it there? Why does he just put an electric fence or an angel fence around the tree so that the Adam and Eve can't get to it? Simple solution, right? If you're God. So this is the fundamental, and it happens very early in the Bible in Genesis, to establish once and for all that God respects our free will, our choice. And that's fundamental to the whole Christian experience. Whether you accept Jesus Christ or not is your choice. God is never going to force you. Right? And that's why he put the tree there, and he gave access, but he told Adam and Eve, of everything in this garden you can eat, but do not eat the fruit of that tree that's right in the middle there. Right? Are you going to obey me? Of course, we know the story. Yeah. So God knows the future not because he controls our actions. He knows the future because he can move through time in a way that no one else can understand, much less experience. And this is important for us because it means that God is in our future, just as he's in our present. God is in our present space right here, right now. God is in our present time right here, right now. But God was also in the past, in our past. He can go back to our past right now, before he formed us in our mother's wombs. He can go to our future and see our future. See Jonah trying to run away from Nineveh. See the fish coming to eat him. Jonah thinking, ha ha, I escaped. God saying, I'm sorry, son, you didn't escape. See the storm coming. See the fish swallowing Jonah. Can go at the same time, picture already Jonah finally submitting to his will and going to Nineveh. Jonah preaching over Nineveh and Nineveh's repentance. For God, all this is like one instant, one moment. He can choose to go wherever he wants. Just as he knows Jonah's future, he knows your future, he knows my future as well. Not because he constrains us, not because he forces us, but because he stands outside time. He stands in our present, our future, all our moments of our future, our past as well. All the prophecies in the Bible, you read about all the way to Revelation, which hasn't happened yet. The knowledge of that all of you will be sitting, all of us will be sitting in this room at this moment. This is all known to God. Read all the amazing prophecies, right? That the people who wrote them could not possibly have known. Daniel, when he imagined the statue, the head of gold, then the upper parts of silver, then of iron, etc., he had no idea what he was talking about. To him, this was just a prophecy that God gave him. With hindsight, we know, of course, that God was talking about the evolution of empires. How the Babylonian Empire would give way to the Medo-Persian Empire, which would in turn give way to the Grecian Empire, Alexander the Great and all that, which would in turn give way to the Roman Empire. Daniel didn't know this, he's just giving this prophecy. It's only with hindsight that man says, now I get it. That's what the prophecy meant. That's what the image meant. right? And it came to pass. If you think about how much was involved for one of those empires to give way to another one at exactly the time that God planned it. The kings that must die, the kings that must arise, the generals and the powers that and the armies that must come together, the battles that must be won by one side and lost by the other side, exactly arranged so that God's prophecy came to pass. The Babylonians, and then the Perso-Medians, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans, etc., etc. I just want us to remember these facts and to think about them a little bit, to realize how amazing our God is. Yeah, I talked about this already. He doesn't force the future because of free will. He's simply there already. So I wanted to give this analogy, right? For us to understand this. For the more scientific, I give you two versions. The more scientific minded can think of it this way, okay? Imagine you're a two-dimensional character. Two-dimensional means you only have length and breadth. You don't have a third dimension. All of us are three-dimensional characters, of course, yeah? We have length of my foot, breadth, the width of my body, right? Also height. But if you were to be a two-dimensional character, moving around in a two-dimensional world, you could move forward, you can move back, side, any of these directions on one plane. But you have no idea what up is or down. No conception. So all of us imagine we're all two-dimensional characters. All right? And then Robbie Goh comes along. I'm a three-dimensional character. I will have such power over all of you. Because you won't even see me coming. You can see just the soles, the one dimension of the soles of my feet. But you can't see me looking down on you. You can't see me stepping over you and going to this side or that side. Because you live in that two dimensions. Okay, for those of you who are not scientific or mathematically minded, imagine an ant. Ant is not exactly two-dimensional, but you will get something about what I'm trying to convey. All right. Have you ever seen an ant running around on a table? Sometimes you're very, very bored, the kids don't want to study, right? Kids, you understand this, like you don't want to study, your mind is full. You see this ant running or little insect running around the table. Sometimes you do that, right? And you look at the ant and you pity the poor ant because you're so much greater than the ant. You know where the ant came from, right? Because you're watching the ant come from the direction. You know the ant's past. You know the ant's present. You can even control the present. You put a cup over the ant, and the poor ant run around inside. Right? Sometimes you've done this. Come on, admit it, right? Sometimes you take some water and put some water in front of the ant. Aha, a flood. A flood. Now what are you going to do, ant? And you know the ant is going to go either this side or that side. You can't go this side because it's the edge of the table. You feel like, God, wow, so much power. And you know where the ant's going to end up? The ant's going to end up at the end of the table because there's no other place for it to go, or the ant is going to end up squashed by your hand because you just feel a bit vicious, a bit mean. You control the ant's power, the future and past. I think that's probably the easiest way for us to remember. Right? I don't do that to ants, by the way, but when I think about ants like that, I'm reminded of how small we must look to God and how great God must be compared to us, so that he can see exactly where we came from. He can go back to that moment where we were there. He can bring us back there if he wanted to. He can see where we're headed. He knows exactly where we are now. He knows all the problems that are going to happen to us, right? He knows that puddle of water that we're going to encounter. Yeah, he knows that obstacle that we're going to have to try to climb around, but it's too high that we can't climb around. He knows all these things before we're there, right? Before the ant hits the puddle, we know. Before we ants hit the puddle, God knows, right? So if you want to think of it in scientific terms, if you're the scientific minded, God inhabits more dimensions than ours. He inhabits 4, maybe 5 dimensions. Yeah, if you're scientific minded, that may appeal to you, right? If you're not scientific minded, just think of the ant compared to the human. And how much greater God is compared to us. How he can not only control our direction, which he won't, because he gives us free will, but he knows where we came from. And he knows the troubles that we're encountering right now. He knows that the things we're going to encounter 1 second from now, 5 minutes from now. an hour from now. And he can see where we're going to end up later on. So that's always helped me try to conceptualize my place before God. Not to make me feel small, but so that I can really acknowledge God's greatness. So that it helps me worship, among other things. And it helps me trust God. It helps me worship because when I see how great are you, Lord, how great is our God, I'm thinking of these things. That God moves through dimensions that I don't even understand. A fourth dimension, a fifth dimension, a sixth, I don't even know. By the way, one day we will know. The promise is there in the Bible as well. Yeah. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Now we see in part, but one day we will know even as we are known. And that's what I'm looking forward to in heaven. I'm going to spend all eternity. I'm going to be that little kid asking God, God, how do you do this? God, how do you do that one? How do you create the stars? What's the name of that star over there? I'm going to ask all these questions because I'm going to spend eternity learning the infinite knowledge and the power of God. So now we can't know, but the promise is this. We will know one day. Yeah, so I hope you're excited and looking forward to that as well. So beyond space, time, reach, extent, the universe, that's well and good. Okay, but if you think about God in just those terms, in a way, you're no different from the pagans. We are no more different from the pagans. Pagans also believe in gods who create the heavens and all this sort of thing. But they don't know these gods. And they don't know the right attributes of these gods. We are very, very blessed because we have a book that tells us. And we have the saints who share their experience and the prophets who tell us these things. About God's character, we actually know God's character. He's not just a power or a force that created 200 billion trillion stars. He's not just this being that exhibits the fourth and the fifth and the sixth, who knows how many dimensions. He's not just somebody who moves through time. He's our God. We know his nature, we know his character. And we know Apostle John tells us God is love. Right? He who loves knows God, for God is love. That's what John tells us. If you ever seen love, if anybody has ever exhibited love to you, it's only because God gave that power. Because God himself is love. The greatest love that you've ever experienced is just a small drop given by God into the human heart so that we can see some glimpse of who he is. Right? He's a capability to love all of mankind. All of us. Sometimes let's be really, really honest. We have trouble loving each other, right? Let's be honest. Sometimes people irritate us, offend us, hurt us. We have trouble loving those people. One person like that is enough to spoil our day, spoil our mood. God has a capacity to love all such among the 4-5 billion people on earth. Think about it, all the murderers, all the killers, all the violent people, all the cheaters, all the annoying people. Right? We have trouble loving just one of those, but God loves all of them. That's his nature. Forgiveness. He's waiting with open arms for these people to turn their hearts, to accept him. Right? His plan was always to save all of humanity. His desire is that every single one would accept him, repent, and be saved. He doesn't want to leave anybody behind because he created all of us. Christ died for all of us. And the power in the cross, the power in Christ's blood, is that every single person who calls on the name of Jesus can be saved. Again, it's a power of forgiveness, a capacity for forgiveness that most of us, I dare say all of us, struggle to try to understand. And definitely we can't do it, of course. Yeah. Beauty and wisdom we talked about. Just amazing, amazing. Spend more time in nature. Trouble with Singaporeans is that we don't want to go into nature because no aircon, right? So we stay in our offices all the time. We don't see this, right? But look at God's creation. You understand. Talked about all those planets and stars and all that. I read somewhere that the distance of Earth from the sun, is perfect to support human life as we know it. If planet Earth had moved 1 or 2% closer to the sun, it'd be too hot, and human life would not be sustainable. We'd be burnt up. Just 1-2%. Don't talk about going halfway to the sun. If it moved 1 or 2% further from the sun, it'll be too cold. And we all freeze. There'll be no life. Right? Except those life forms in ice crystals, that kind of life, but not organic life, not human, animal, biological life. Right? The positioning of the earth is just right to sustain life. Yeah? Again, if you want to believe it's just Big Bang, nobody created this, nobody thought this through, go ahead. But I find it very, very difficult to believe. Put all the evidence together, how fearfully and wonderfully made man is, how the miracles and of the subcellular life holds together, the subatomic particles interact and combine together, and just to make this wonderful, beautiful, fantastically thought out earth. You put all the evidence together, it's really, really, really hard to believe that this was done automatically without some kind of thought or intelligence. Right? So the beauty of creation, the wisdom of creation as well. Right? Majesty and glory. Yeah, we sang this earlier on, and it came from Psalm 104, who covers himself with light like a garment. Can you imagine a being who can pull together light? We talk about speed of light and how, the impossible it is for the humans to colonize habitable worlds out there, because we can't move that far. The space between us and those planets, even if those planets existed, would take many, many light years to cross. That means if we could move at the speed of light, which we can't, right, it will still take us many years to get there. Because we can't move at the speed of light, it will take us hundreds or thousands of years to get to some of those planets. But God controls light. That light which we cannot even move at the speed of or anywhere close to. He wears it like a garment. He covers himself with light. That's the glory of God. Yeah. Who stretches out the heavens like a curtain. That's amazing, right? Yeah. Sometimes I can't even reach the curtain in my room, but God stretches out the universe, the planets, the stars like a curtain. Right? And I love this part where Moses asked God, show me your glory. Right? Moses says, if you don't come with us, your presence doesn't come with us, we don't want to go into the promised land. There are too many obstacles. We don't have enough faith to do this. But again, the people that do know that God will be strong and do great things. That's what Moses wanted as well. He wanted to know his God very, very thoroughly so that he will have the strength to lead the children of Israel into the promised land and to defeat the 6 nations that were waiting to destroy them. Right? And what God said to him was, you cannot see my face, for there shall no man see me and live. That's the glory of God. It's so awesome and so amazing that we cannot just casually walk up to God and say, hi, God. Even the great high priest, okay, had to go into the Holy of Holies where God's presence was only once a year. And he did it very, very carefully, washing, atonement, sacrifice, right? All the conditions controlled so that God's mercy will allow him to enter the Holy of Holies once a year. And even then, they put bells on the hems of his garment just in case something went wrong. He didn't do the proper atonement and he went into the presence of God and he died. Then they'll know that he died. They can pull him out because of the bells. God's awesome nature is not to be taken for granted. And God reminded of Moses of this. You cannot see my face. There's no living person can see my face and survive. Just from the sheer power and the glory of God. Right? But that's God's awesomeness. But we also see God's grace. God says, I want you to see my glory, even though you can't see me face to face. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in a cliff of the rock, a little hollow space there. I'm going to protect you with my own hand. And I'm going to pass by so that you can just experience the nearness of my glory without looking at me face to face, which you cannot do being a man. And that's what the Lord did. He allowed Moses to have this wonderful experience with an awesome God whose incredible power Moses could not even conceive of, much less experience. And Moses' encounters with God completely transformed him. He went from being a hot-headed prince brought up by the Egyptians, became a killer, ran away, became a shepherd, slow of tongue, cannot speak properly. Right? And then he became a reluctant leader of the children of Israel. But when he encountered God, each time he encountered God, he was transformed. Came down from the mount and his face was completely glowing from received glory. Not his own glory, not even close to God's glory, but just an echo, just a reflection of God's glory. And that reflection was so powerful that the children of Israel could not look, not on God's face, but on Moses' face. Just the echo of God's glory was too much for them to look at. That's the God we are dealing with. That's our God. So, this is why I wanted to share these verses and some of these thoughts about God's nature. I wanted us to remember that He's the Lord, the God of all flesh. There's nothing too difficult for Him. When you understand that this God can make 200 billion trillion stars, created all life, brings down to the grave whenever He wants, and raises up again, no problem. Jesus Christ is only the first example of many, many others that He can do that for. And when Paul was defending himself to the Roman governor Festus and to King Agrippa, he says, why should it be thought a thing incredible with you that God should raise the dead? If we know our God, there should be no doubt in our mind whatsoever that raising the dead for Him is nothing. It's commonplace. It's the simplest thing for Him to do. So I return to this. The people that do know that God shall be strong and do great things. And we as a church, Talent Beacon, we as members of families, members in the marketplace, workers in the marketplace, bosses, colleagues in the marketplace, doctors, lawyers, whatever you do, we need to know for sure the power of this God. The old-time evangelists used to say, if He's not God of all, He's not God at all. God of all. It means everything, not just your finances and your health and your family and your job. This is just so small for Him. He's the God of the whole world, of every single person. He knows your hearts. He knows your thoughts. He controls your finances, your health. He knows the state of all of those 200 billion trillion stars or however many they are. One becomes a supernova. One becomes a red dwarf, red giant. He knows all these things. He's seen it coming. He knows when it's going to happen before it happens. Brothers and sisters, I plead with you, do not make our God too small. That's a deadly mistake. The enemy loves that. Don't give him the satisfaction. Put our God where He belongs. The great, the almighty, ruler of all things, creator of all things. And this is where I want to end. Simple as this. This verse has so much power. Romans chapter 8, as if the Lord reminded me. I read the Bible through from Genesis to Revelation, and I just read this yesterday. And the Lord reminded me, put this in. So I put this in. If God be for us, this same God that we need to know certainly, know surely, know Him as He is, not as we want Him to be or in a comfortable little box, because that is less scary for us. No, we need to know Him as He is. If this God, who is ruler and maker of all things, nothing can stand against Him. Nothing is impossible for Him. Nothing is too difficult. Not raising the dead, not creating another star, no problem. If this God is for us, tell me logically, who can be against us? What can be against us? Not Satan, not all the evil angels, not cancer, not diabetes, not stroke. All of these things are just not worth comparing to God's power. They're just so small. Not financial problems, not bad bosses. None of these things can be compared. And how do you know he's for us? The next verse, who did not spare his own son, but freely gave him up for all of us. This is the proof that God sent his own son himself, really, because we know that the Son is part of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, to come down to earth, to be man, to take all our sins upon him, even though he was without sin himself, to die on the cross, to suffer a humiliating, painful death at the hands of his own creatures. There's no way that man can ever kill God, except God made himself small as a man himself, so that he can be killed by his own creatures to fulfill God's justice. And because of that act from Jesus Christ, we all have access to this mighty God.